You know, when was the last time that you turned on the news and you saw a story about how there were no massive fires in your town that day? Or how there weren't any horrific car accidents or rapes or murders, or how that nobody was killed in Iraq today? I'm going to go out on a limb and assume it never really happened. The question is why?
So you're asking why doesn't the news cover it when nothing happens? Well, for the same reason a person with a full head of hair doesn't join the hair club for men. For the same reason that a person who gets lots of pussy doesn't pay for a prostitute. Because when there's nothing happening, that's not news. News, by its very definition, is when something happens. So when nothing's happening, the news doesn't cover that. Simple enough for you to understand, Glenn? Good.
Well, there's a couple of reasons for it. One, it's not the media's job to show you the average, everyday things that happen in life. They need to show you the extraordinary, to document what life is like out on the fringes.
No, it's not their job to document what life is like out on the fringes. It's their job to report events, things of consequence happening in the world, or in our country, or in their local area. That is the job of the news. Being sorta kinda not really a newsman yourself, I'd think you'd at least have an inkling as to what the news's function was, but apparently that's asking too much from a fucking idiot like you.
It may really be ironic, but the mainstream media usually covers everything except mainstream America.
Irony is when the outcome of an event doesn't necessarily meet expectations, usually with some sort of poetic incongruity thrown in. Mainstream media not covering mainstream America, that's not ironic, because it's not their job to tell people, here's what mainstream America's like. People who live in mainstream America know what mainstream America's like because they are mainstream Americans. If they need to figure out what they're like from the news, then they're fucking stupid, which of course they fucking are. Which is what you count on, because if people weren't stupid, they wouldn't possibly be able to watch your fucking pitiful excuse for a show.
The boring reality, the story you'll never see on the news, is that we are much more alike than we are different. You know that 89% of us believe in God? 89% want the phrase "under God" to stay in the pledge. But one of the stories the media covered today is the atheist group that's asking Obama not to use the word God in the swearing-in ceremony. Here we are, and I did it, giving the fringes attention. Why?
Glenn, I live in the fucking South, dude. You can't bullshit me. I know rednecks. I know that rednecks are racist and sexist and proud of it, and that people like you appeal to them. Now, of course, you would never say anything racist or sexist on the air, but you know who you're appealing to. When you talk all this populist nonsense on your television program or your radio show, you know who you're talking to. You're talking to the bigoted dumbass redneck sitting there at home swilling a fucking beer, not thinking about anything, just sitting there stewing in his bitter resentment because the fags and the niggers have taken over America. People like me actually have something of a voice, according to people like you, even though I really don't see myself having a voice. I don't have a television program on Fox News like you do. How much representation do these people need in the media? They've got you, and they've got Bill O'Reilly, and they've got Nancy Grace. They've got all these wonderful voices in the media. You, a member of the media, is claiming that the media doesn't represent the people. Well, there you are. You're on TV. You get to espouse your opinion in front of an audience of millions of people. Here I am, relegated to YouTube, preaching the gospel to 20, 30,000 people every video. I think if you're going to make a case that a segment of the American population is being underrepresented, I could make it a fuck of a lot better than you, Mr. Glenn Beck on Fox News, nationally syndicated. And sure, you do represent a larger chunk of the country than I do. I freely admit to that. People like you and Bill O'Reilly, and even Keith Olbermann and Rachel Maddow, represent a larger chunk of the population than I do, be they mainstream left or mainstream right. I know that I don't fit in. I know that I'm a fringe element, according to you. But why does that mean that I don't deserve to have my voice heard in America? You said that 90% of the American people believe in God. Well, I'm one of the 10% that don't. That's 1 out of 10 people. Isn't 1 out of 10 people enough to have a voice in this country? I guess that, you know, if we're gonna say that minorities don't have a voice, then I guess the Jews don't deserve a voice, and the blacks don't deserve a voice, and the American Aborigines don't deserve a voice. The only people who deserve a voice are people who are in the majority. Is that right? Am I understanding you correctly?
You probably feel a little small and powerless. But that is the biggest cover-up in history, and for once, the media is not exploiting it. You aren't alone. We're not alone, we're not helpless, and we certainly aren't powerless, because the truth is, we surround the nut jobs on the fringe.
Under God still is in the pledge, is it not? After you artificially inserted it in the 1950s during the Red Scare, it's still on our money, isn't it? You're the ones exerting the influence. What you're mad about is the fact that the news even covered our opinion. The fact that we even had airtime. The fact that we even had a chance to maybe convince even a few people that we were right and the majority was wrong. That's what you're objecting to here. It's not like we're making some major inroads into fucking defeating you and taking your shit away. You're just pissed off because the news gave us a voice. Briefly. And only to mock us, really. Only so a bunch of snooty-ass news anchors could sit there and say, the atheists, look at them whining and bitching about how they want under God taken out of the pledge. How ridiculous. How ridiculous they'd want us to adhere to the First Amendment of the Constitution. Bunch of fucking pansy-ass whiners. So my contention is, Glenn, that you and your ilk are all a bunch of goddamn spineless cowards who are afraid to have any sort of real debate on things because you just want to put the stamp of majority rules on every issue. Because you have this delusional belief that because you're in the majority, that means you're correct. Reality is not based on consensus, Glenn. Just because 90% of people believe something, or 99% of people believe something, or 100% of people believe something, that doesn't mean it's the truth.